20,000 bodies. An orchard of nightmare where the trees were spears and the fruit were men. Laid out in concentric rings, the highest captive raised on the tallest stake like a standard. It was not a massacre. It was architecture. It did not argue. It announced. Beneath the pale light outside Târgoviște in 1462, the wind carried a heavy sweetness of rot over a valley measured not in acres, but in agonies. The geometry was deliberate. Circles within circles, rank within rank. A theater with no audience but an army that could not look away. At the center, dressed once in silk, now stiff with weather, a great Ottoman notable, Hamza Pasha by some accounts, crowned the tableau. The arrangement said what no envoy could: turn back. Mehmed II, Conqueror of Constantinople, rode forward and saw a weapon he could not counter with cavalry or bronze. His columns, disciplined, enormous, made to break walls and men, met something colder than steel, will shaped into spectacle. For days the march had felt wrong. Villages emptied and burned themselves behind the rear guard. Wells tasted of ash. Night raids slid through the tents like knives, and rumors, sickness, sorcery, betrayal, spread faster than orders. But this was different. This was the end of language. The Sultan's officers counted, then stopped counting. Numbers ceased to persuade when the ground itself made an argument. The display was not random cruelty. It was policy, Vlad's policy, applied with surveyor's string and executioner's patience. The rings widened across the plain, each stake set so that a man on horseback could read the message without dismounting. There will be no battle you can win. The bodies were not just dead. They were positioned, ranked, curated. The forest turned the greatest army in the region into spectators, and spectators into doubters. What victory cancels the memory of this? What fortress, taken at cost, balances the book against a valley like a wound? Mehmed's genius was siege and shock. Wallachia offered neither. It offered absence and then this presence too absolute to accept. Here the logistics of empire, grain, coin, morale, met a frontier prince who had weaponized revulsion, and revulsion does not yield to arithmetic. The Janissaries could clear a breach. They could not clear an idea. Men who had climbed the Theodosian walls felt their stomachs lift, their eyes fix on the center stake and refused to move. The line halted. Officers conferred in low voices that tried not to tremble. Scouts reported nothing worth reporting. No ambush, no army, only a field that would not be forgotten. Behind Mehmed, banners sighed. Ahead, the city waited, quiet, unburned, beyond a geometry of dread. In that pause lived the truth of the campaign. Vlad did not need to defeat the Ottomans. He needed to make them recoil. He had turned land into theater, corpses into script, and fear into a sovereign power. The conqueror had met an enemy he could not besiege. He could only leave. He learned the language of power in a foreign tongue. As a boy, Vlad, third son of Vlad II Dracula, was handed over to the Ottomans as surety, a living signature beneath his father's treaty. In Edirne, he shared corridors and tutors with another hostage prince, his younger brother Radu, the Beautiful and Pliant. They studied Quran and strategy, archery and etiquette, Latin prayers remembered only at night. Mehmed, the future conqueror, passed through those same halls. Boys measured each other like drawn blades. Hostagehood was not a dungeon, but a school with iron rules. Survive by reading faces faster than they change. Repay every humiliation with interest. Remember that mercy is an expense account your enemies do not carry. Vlad came from a house draped in a dragon. His father, Dracula, knighted into Sigismund of Luxembourg's Order of the Dragon, had pledged to stand against the Turk, and then like all frontier rulers, learned to bend. Wallachia was a vice, the Carpathians at its back, the Danube at its front, and two great hands, Buda and Edirne, closing and opening with the seasons. Kings and sultans demanded tribute, levy, hostages, corridors for armies not their own. Boyars played double and triple, merchants on Friday, conspirators on Sunday. A prince here ruled the way a rider keeps his seat in a storm, by tightening everything that can be tightened and kicking hard when the horse shies. His first crown fit like a borrowed helmet. In 1448, with Ottoman nods and Hungarian frowns, Vlad seized Târgoviște, only to lose it within weeks when John Hunyadi's shadow fell across the plain. He fled. Exile taught him a second lesson. You cannot inherit Wallachia. You must terrify it into existing around you. The second reign, beginning in 1456 after Hunyadi's death, showed the method refined. He burned the tax rolls and rewrote them as obligations to himself. He summoned boyars to an Easter feast and did not let them leave, some to stakes, others to forced labor, all to a new arithmetic. Treason costs more than loyalty. He impaled because it worked. Messages outrun messengers. A forest of warnings keeps the next forest from growing. The geography chose the politics. Flat corridors tempt cavalry. Mountain passes invite ambush. River lines demand ransoms of grain and men. Wallachia could not outspend Hungary, outnumber the Porte, or outlast both at once. It could, however, make the price of interference rise faster than the reward. Fear, then, was not sadism wearing a crown. It was logistics sharpened to a point. If your nobles are weather vanes, drive iron through the pole. If your neighbor calculates, hand him a column of figures written in blood. If your brother smiles in a foreign court, remind the court that smiles are soft tissue. Radu chose survival by charm. Vlad chose sovereignty by terror. Both learned in the same classroom, but only one accepted the final exam question. How do you build a country in a place designed for other empires' roads? Vlad's answer, forged in Edirne and hammered on the Danube, was simple and unforgivable. Make fear cheaper than invasion and obedience cheaper than conspiracy. The boy hostage had studied empire. The man-prince would teach it what a frontier can do. They came dressed for Easter, not judgment. Velvet caps, pearl-studded caftans, rings that testified to generations of buying and unmaking princes. Wallachia's boyars filed into Târgoviște expecting ritual, roast lamb, and predictable flattery. Vlad offered all the courtesies, incense, bright cloth on the tables, a prayer said in a voice that did not tremble. Then he shut the doors. What follows is told with variations. German pamphleteers will swell the numbers. Slavic analysts will compress them. The year floats between 1457 and 1459 in different hands. But the core action stands like oak. Vlad turned the feast into an audit. He called names, asked who had backed which claimant in which winter, who had paid tribute twice, once to Buda and again to Edirne, who had smiled at his father and sharpened a knife for his brother. The old men answered with practiced ambiguity. Ambiguity had kept them alive through famines and changes of flag. Vlad listened. Then he ordered the elders seized. The executions were not frenzy. They were punctuation. Stakes had been cut in advance and the courtyard cleared. The tallest poles were visible from the road. The elder magnates, those who had survived every storm by bending with it, were raised as examples, their estates as empty as their eyes. Blood pooled beneath the colonnade. The city heard and understood. Hereafter, the value of a signature would be measured against the shadow of a spear. For the younger and stronger, the sentence was movement, not death. Vlad marched them out of the capital under guard, hundreds of nobles and their households driven like a labor column toward the Târgoviște Valley. The destination was a spur of rock above the river, a ruin from older wars named Poenari. The prince pointed at broken walls and told them to make a fortress, not pay for it, build it. Through summer heat and mountain cold, they hauled stone, felled timber, dragged lime. Those who faltered learned that stakes grow in any season. The castle rose from their exhaustion, an eagle's nest mortared with fear. Why this? Because boyar factionalism was a machine that ground rulers into meat. A prince in Wallachia did not reign. He rented the crown from men who kept a drawer of receipts. Today Hungarian, tomorrow Ottoman, always profitable. Vlad's calculus inverted theirs. He could not purchase loyalty. Budapest and Edirne bid higher. But he could raise the price of treason beyond actuarial sense. Kill the memory of impunity in the elders. Bind the juniors to a wall they themselves had built. Make every view from Poenari a lesson in what happens when a country is run by committees. Even friends were unsettled. The message cut both ways. This ruler would not be managed. But the frontier needs a singular will. After Easter, the court wore simpler rings, and audiences began with eyes lowered. The prince had traded love for leverage. And in a corridor between empires, leverage is the only currency that keeps until winter. They called it raiding. Vlad treated it as demolition. In the winter of 1461 to 1462, when the Danube skinned over in panes of black glass and supply wagons squealed like hunted things, Wallachian columns crossed by ford and ferry and moved along the south bank like a fire line. Villages that had flown the crescent, Bulgarian market towns that provisioned Ottoman garrisons, customs posts with tidy ledgers, each met the same sequence. Granaries opened and burned, hayricks toppled into sparks, mills jammed with stones, wells salted or seeded with carrion. Herds were driven north. Anything that could not walk was put to the torch. This was not ransom war. The old border economy where you seize men for money and send them home chastened. Vlad wrote to King Matthias boasting of 23,884 enemies slain. Whether the arithmetic is precise or polemical, the method is not in doubt. Prisoners were currency only as messages. Some were impaled in view of river crossings. Others marched in chains toward Wallachia to feed labor gangs, and the legend of a prince who repaid trespass with annihilation. Children and the elderly trudged in the same columns as captured sipahis. Mercy was not the point. Memory was. Ottoman garrisons learned to dread silence. Scouts reported empty hamlets and ovens still warm. Then arrows fell out of tree lines and the cook fires on the outpost ridge went up all at once. Patrols sent to chase shadows found rotten meat waiting the village cistern. A few days later, the garrison's bellies turned and their heads followed. Messengers rode for Vidin or Nikopol with lists of needs. Fodder, men, a doctor who had seen this sickness before, and rode back into smoke. The Danube became a conveyor of warnings, rafts of headless trunks spinning toward the Black Sea, barrels packed with severed noses and ears, flotillas of hacked timbers that snagged on ferry chains and spilled their freight of fear at the docks. Wallachia was not spared. It was weaponized. On the north bank, Vlad ordered fields along likely invasion routes harvested early or burned clean. Way stations were stocked with dry wood and spare shoes, not for comfort, but for speed. Villages closest to the crossings were partly evacuated, their roofs left thatched to tempt the enemy's first bivouac. Their cellars were scraped of grain. The prince's riders moved by night, leaving Turkish curses scratched into door lintels and false trail marks for Ottoman scouts to discover. Dawn revealed the same tableau on loop. Ash, hoofprints, and a few survivors, too frightened to speak. The border lit and relit for months. Bulgarian peasants cursed Wallachia and the Sultan in the same breath. Ottoman officers filed reports that read like bad dreams. No set-piece battles, no standards taken, only nerves frayed to rags. By spring, the Empire's Danubian command understood the truth. Vlad wanted them to swallow whole. He would not meet them on ground of their choosing, because he had turned the ground itself into a weapon. They crossed in confidence and in layers. Vanguard scouts, siege wagons, janissary files, Sipahi squadrons, the long tail of bakers and smiths and scribes that makes an army a nation in motion. Call it 100,000 or less. Sources disagree. But the impression was the same to every village that heard the drum line roll across the bridges. The conqueror himself was coming. Mehmed II expected the grammar of war he had mastered at Constantinople. Reconnaissance, contact, deployment, pressure, collapse. What he found on the North Bank was absence, arranged like a trap. The first miles felt like theft. Orchards untouched, wells brimming, barns stacked high, until a spark ran across the thatch and the harvest became smoke. Outriders chased silhouettes through tall rye and came back with nothing but arrows in their saddles. Patrols entered hamlets still warm with life, stew bowls half-eaten, rushes fresh on the floors, and tasted the water only to discover, a day later, that their guts had been primed as weapons. A coughing horse fell, then two more. The surgeons muttered about rot in the cisterns and the strange sweet stink that clung to the village square. The quartermasters reported spoilt grain, the kind you cannot smell until the pot boils. By day, the columns advanced into a landscape that rehearsed its own erasure. Fields scythed too early, bridges half-sawn to drop at a touch. Waymarkers flipped to turn roads into rings. By night, the camp broke into shards of panic. Shadows cut tent ropes. Pickets went missing and were found at dawn, staked like signposts. Voices called orders in Turkish from the tree line, correct enough to be credible, wrong enough to cause collisions. Fires leapt in 3 different places at once, a geometry of confusion. When torches finally illuminated the raiders, they were already backing into the dark, bait in pursuit toward ravines and swamps that swallowed horses to the girth. Mehmed rode forward through the haze of green wood burning, fury held behind a mask of ceremony. The viziers spoke of forcing a battle. The Janissary Aga requested tighter perimeter cords. The scouts begged for time to map the maze of streams and coppices. The Sultan granted all and trusted none. Orders went out for stricter camp discipline, for triangulated watchfires, for water only from guarded springs. He tightened the march, shortened the lines of communication, fed men and animals on rationed biscuit. Progress became a grind of corrective measures, and still the enemy refused to stand. Disease traveled faster than dispatches. Mules stumbled under loads they'd carried 100 times. Soldiers slumped on their shields at noon and woke at dusk, clammy and shaking. The physicians blamed tainted wells. The imams urged ablutions and patience. Meanwhile, the maps filled with erasures, roads that ended in felled timber, fords that had become mud traps, guides who guided nowhere. The enemy was present only as subtraction, a meal missing, a messenger late, a rumor planted. Every night the drums beat to keep courage stitched together. Every morning the light revealed nothing but retreating smoke and hoofprints veering into forest. Expectations of a set-piece showdown shrank to a single imperative: find him. But Vlad did not need to be found. He was in the air men breathed, in the water they feared to drink, in the math of lost hours and shortened tempers. The conqueror kept marching, and with each mile the battlefield receded, not outward, but inward, into the minds of his army. They chose a moonless slice of June, when even dogs sleep hard, and the Danube's breath can't find the tents. Vlad had already walked the camp once in a different skin, face smoked and clothes cut to Ottoman fashion, learning the paths between cook fires, weighing the pace of patrols, fixing the position of the royal pavilion in his mind like a nail. He returned to his own lines with a map no scribe could draw. Distances measured by heartbeats, landmarks by smells, escape lanes by the rhythm of guards' feet. The assault began the way thunder begins. Silence held too long. Pickets at the perimeter died without a sound. Then a handful of torches flared and died again, not to light the way, but to blind the nearest eyes. Wallachian riders slid between guy ropes, whispering orders in Turkish, just wrong enough to turn squads the wrong direction. A drum rolled near the baggage, another by the horse lines, and then hundreds of tents bloomed fire in a pattern meant to suggest a line of battle where there was none. Men poured from canvas, half-armed, saw figures moving and heard their own tongue, and struck at shadows that answered them in their own accents. Vlad drove the spearhead himself. No prince's distance. He was a blade seeking a throat. The route he had rehearsed threaded through the domed tents of viziers and scribes toward the richest silk. The tent where the night should have been deepest. They hit like a thrown door. The first guard died surprised. The second fell shouting. The third lived long enough to cry, "To the Sultan!" And that cry did the work Vlad wanted. Panic traveling faster than fire. Within the cordon, the janissaries formed by reflex. But reflex needs direction, and every direction was suddenly noise. Orders contradicted by perfect Turkish shouted from the dark. For long seconds, the elite fought each other's shadows. At the pavilion, everything was motion. The royal guard had already moved Mehmed at the first flare of chaos. Good practice from other lives, other assassination nights. Vlad burst into brocade and smoke and found rank without quarry. Advisors cut down where they sat, a litter half raised, cushions bleeding. He pressed deeper, the route he'd memorized kinked by a rearranged cluster of tents. Enough delay to turn a kill into a near miss. Steel met steel. The Wallachian wedge stalled. The Ottoman core stiffened around absence like plaster around a missing statue. Retreat orders in Vlad's camp were never more than a breath away from the attack orders. On his shout, the raiders ripped back the way they'd come, setting more tents as they passed and throwing voices sideways to draw pursuit into wagon lanes and picket lines. Dawn found the field looking like a city after an earthquake, fires guttering, bodies in Ottoman dress cut by Ottoman blades, officers counting losses with black hands of soot. Mehmed lived, but the narrative had slipped. He had not been hunted at a distance. He had been sought in his bed. The army would march on, yet every night hence would carry a new condition. Sleep would require proof. Command cohesion frayed, not from defeat in formation, but from the knowledge that a smaller will had reached for the Empire's throat and almost closed its fist. Tactical failure, strategic success. They reached the valley at mid-morning, when the heat lifts smells and lays them over men like wet cloth. First came the silence, the kind that follows a shout you haven't yet heard. Then the smell, sweet, sick, metallic. Files slowed. Officers barked. The line broke not in panic, but in reluctance. as if the ground itself had thickened. Before Târgoviște, the trees gave way to something planted by hands, a forest that did not move. Tens of thousands of stakes, paired and greased, rose in ranks. The dead were fruit. It was not chaos. It was draftsmanship. Rings within rings, corridors left open for the eye, horizons forced by perspective. The lowest stakes carried common captives, teamsters, levy spearmen, village heads, arranged by height, so the gaze traveled inward. Mid-circles bore soldiers in coats the army recognized, tunics stiff as boards. And at the geometric heart, above the plane of horror, one spear lofted a silk-wrapped ruin. Hamza Pasha. His robes were wind-tattered, his signet glinting proof against disbelief. He had been an envoy once, then a prisoner, then a punctuation mark. Impalement is slower than a sword and more articulate. It says, "This land is curated." It tells a commander his map is wrong. The symbols are not forts and bridges, but nerves. Vlad's genius here was not arithmetic, but rhetoric. 20,000 is a number. Concentric order makes the number think. It informs every captain that someone arranged this exhibit with time to spare, that the man they hunt has hands steady enough to compose horror, and a will cold enough to wait for them to arrive and read it. The message does not argue. It occupies. Mehmed rode forward because a sultan must. The Janissary screen opened, the smell intensified, the lesson sharpened. He had seen cities broken and empires folded into the Ottoman script. Those were mechanics, siegecraft, bribery, bridging. This was something else. A sovereign declaring that terrain would be governed by terror until terror itself did the governing. The conqueror counted, his siege train intact, his supply lines strained but uncut, his core formations unbloodied after the night raid. Military capacity said advance, but capacity is not will. Armies march on stories they tell themselves at dusk. What story survives this view? He weighed outcomes. Push through the theater, accept tainted water, sleepless nights, disease seeded by released prisoners and rotting air, then take a capital that is already ash. Or pivot, preserve the army that must face other fronts. Trebizond's flank, Karaman's gnawing, the sea that never empties, and concede nothing on paper while conceding everything that matters to men's nerves. The calculus resolved itself where strategy meets anatomy, in the stomach. He ordered primers for the dead, signals for counter-march, speed without haste, no rout, an edit. Wallachia had not defeated the Ottoman Empire. It had rewritten the margin notes. Mehmed's legions left with their weapons and their banners, and the knowledge that force had found a limit not in walls, but in a mind willing to make the land unfit for victory. The body count mattered less than the geometry. The geometry mattered less than the story it wrote across the horizon. Here, the price of triumph is to be remade by it. He chose not to pay. The army turned back, but the empire did not. Mehmed understood that some fortresses are made of nerves, and he had someone who could dissolve them from within. His name was Radu Shelfrumos the Fair, Vlad's younger brother, raised in the same Ottoman court, speaking the same Turkish, understanding the same cues of rank and rage. Where Vlad had distilled captivity into hatred, Radu had learned accommodation, the choreography of proximity to power. The Sultan did not need another invasion. He needed an alternative. Radu crossed the Danube not with a host to conquer, but with a retinue to reassure. A few thousand horse, janissaries for spine and symbol. The real army rode on parchment, letters to boyars promising amnesty, restoration of confiscated estates, reopened markets, safe conduct to anyone who declared for the rightful prince. No levies, no burnings, no midnight summons that ended on stakes. A country, exhausted by heroic terror, was offered something subtler, the possibility of tomorrow looking like yesterday again. The offer landed where it was meant to, in courtyards lined with new stone paid for by old rents, among men who measured safety in suns, granaries, and winter fodder. Vlad's fear had welded Wallachia into a blade. Blades are hard to hold. Each rumor of Radu's clemency loosened a grip. A gate that once opened only to the prince's herald now opened to a quiet Ottoman courier with a seal and a promise. A steward hesitated signing a requisition for spikes. A Castellan counted arrows and wondered who would pay for more. Terror projected outward, turned back along the same roads it had traveled, and began to collect tolls at Vlad's own doors. The war changed timbre. No front line, no set pieces, just a map pocked with negotiations. A boyar sent his nephew to Radu's camp to learn his language, then his brother to discuss terms, then his oath to preserve the realm. Vlad answered with what had always worked: swift punishment, exemplary deaths, property leveled to bare foundations. It worked until it didn't. Each impalement proved Radu's point more loudly than any proclamation. There is a way to live that does not involve waking to the smell of pitch and the fear of hoofbeats. Radu styled himself not as Mehmed's instrument, but as Wallachia's antidote. He rode with priests and merchants as often as with captains, promised exemptions, reopened ferry posts, floated grain down rivers Vlad had turned into conveyors of warning. The countryside, which had once hidden Vlad's raiders, now hid Radu's envoys. Small garrisons surrendered without a clatter. Others let the night pass and found a new banner over the gate at dawn. By degrees, the struggle ceased to be empire versus frontier, and hardened into something more intimate and cruel, a civil sorting between loyalty and survival. Men who had cheered the night attack now counted their children and chose the brother whose tomorrow did not smell of carrion. Vlad remained more feared. Radu became easier to follow. In the arithmetic of princes, fear is a multiplier until a calmer number arrives and makes more sense. Poenari did not rise out of the earth so much as cling to it, a rib of red stone stapled to a cliff above the Târgoviște, with one serpentine stair and the sky for a moat. When Radu came, he did not waste men on ladders. He ringed the mountain with guns. The first iron balls thudded into the walls like slow, deliberate verdicts. They did not smash the keep. They pulverized time. Each impact shook dust from rafters, cracked cisterns, and shortened tempers. Inside, Vlad's last loyalists counted barrels and curses. Outside, the besiegers set their clocks by the artillery, methodical, unheroic, inevitable. Then, the arrow came. It arced from the dark like a second moon, clattered in a courtyard, and wore a parchment tail sealed with the promise of tomorrow. Amnesty for the garrison, pay and pardon to any man who opened a gate, only the prince reserved for judgment. The words moved faster than the cannonballs. They slipped through barracks talk, sat down at mess, and asked simple questions. How long will the water last? Whose sons will starve first? That no proclamation of glory could answer. Fear had kept Poenari together. Hunger began to pry its fingers. Vlad doubled the watches, halved the rations, and walked the parapets with the same unblinking intensity that had broken boyars and terrified invaders. But terror is a blade that dulls against stone. The mountain did not flinch. Men did. In the highest tower, his wife watched the valley glitter with campfires in concentric rings that seemed to tighten each dusk. She knew what capture meant in Ottoman practice and noble gossip alike. One evening, with the guns thudding like a foreshortened heartbeat. She told her husband she would not be paraded as a trophy. The chronicles give her no speeches. The legend gives her a choice. She took the parapet and the drop. The river kept the secret of her body and kept her name. Night fell like a curtain the artillery could not pierce. In the keep's belly, Mason's old work waited. A hidden gallery chiseled into the mountain, a crawl of damp stone that led not down to the gate, but out and away to the tree line. Vlad gathered a knot of diehards and a smith. The order was precise and perverse. Pull the best horses, reverse their shoes, nail the crescent to the heel, and the heel to the crescent. Let the first light show tracks that appear to climb toward Poenari, not fall from it. They went when the wind turned and the watch changed. Down the rock throat, lanterns hooded, the prince carrying the last of his papers and the first of his next plans. Above them, cannon rumbled and a whispering garrison weighed math against memory. Below, the forest received them without a question. By dawn, Radu's men found a fortress lighter by a dozen shadows and a switchback staircase littered with the thoughts of men who had almost betrayed and now could say they never did. On the scree beyond the ridge, the hoofprints pointed the wrong way, as designed. The mountain kept its other secret, the path of a prince who made terror his language and escape his last sentence. Buddha did not greet him with trumpets. It clicked shut like a lock. Vlad rode north, expecting an ally's embrace from King Matthias Corvinus, banner of crusade, mailed fist of Hungary, and found a courtroom instead. On the green baize lay letters with his seal, perfect in their damning grammar. Oaths of fealty to Sultan Mehmed, offers of Wallachia in exchange for Ottoman aid against the Hungarians. They were fabrications, almost certainly forged within Corvinus's circle, or supplied by Saxon enemies who had every reason to see Vlad discredited. But they were useful. Hungary needed quiet with the Porte, more than it needed a volatile partner who set borders on fire. In a single audience, the shield of Christendom became a diplomatic embarrassment. Guards took his sword. Courtesy took its time. Then the door closed on 12 years. The prison was not an oubliette of chains and rats, so much as a sequence of respectable confinements. Visegrad's tower above the Danube, guarded houses in Buda, a courtly leash that allowed mass and manners, but never a return to power. The golden cage was built of paperwork and optics. Corvinus could point to the letters, swear he had neutralized a traitor, and extract money from the West to fight Turks without actually fighting them that year. Vlad, the man who weaponized terror, was neutralized by stationery. Captivity did not stop the war for his reputation. It moved it to the printing press. In the German towns of Transylvania and the Rhineland, Brasov, Nuremberg, Lübeck, Saxon burghers who had suffered his punitive raids found a new siege engine, cheap paper and hunger for lurid tales. Pamphlets poured off wooden presses. Woodcuts bit his face into legend. There he sat, a hawk-nosed prince dining among forests of stakes. There he rinsed his hands in bowls of blood. There he impaled merchants for short waits or nailed turbans to skulls for disrespect. Each broadsheet told a moral: obedience is life, rebellion meets the stake, and each sold. Names hardened. His father's badge, Order of the Dragon, Dracul, made the son Draculea, which German mouths turned to Dracula. The epithet slipped its heraldic origin and drank from darker wells. Stories blurred dates, multiplied body counts, and restaged punishments with theatrical precision. Some episodes trace back to hostile chronicles. Others are pure stagecraft. But the effect was cumulative. While the Ottomans called him a nuisance and Corvinus called him a problem, Central Europe learned to call him a monster. Inside the cage, time did what sieges do. It thinned the body, paired the circle of confidants, and honed intent to a point. Vlad married into Hungarian nobility to suit Corvinus's politics, learned court ritual well enough to be displayed without scandal, and waited. He could not raid across the Danube, so he marched obsessively across the page. Marginalia of grievance, plans rehearsed in silence. Outside, printers minted fear as coin. Inside, fear's author rehearsed a comeback. When the hinges finally turned in the mid-1470s, the world he re-entered already knew him. It did not know the man from the shop-worn image, but the image would ride ahead of him like a banner he had not designed yet, could never lay down. The hinges finally turned, not as a crusader's trumpet, but as a calculation in Buddha. The papacy called for fresh pressure on the port. Matthias Corvinus needed a banner that terrified before it even drew a sword. He married Vlad into the Hungarian royal web, and with Stephen the Great of Moldavia as partner, sent him south in 1476, less a prince restored than a projectile fired. The coalition moved like a set of iron tongs. Stephen's Moldavians pressing from the northeast, Hungarian contingents and Transylvanian levies from the west, Wallachian exiles and churchmen reading out proclamations that named Dracula again, voivode. The Ottoman client on the throne, Basarab Laiota, wavered and fled. In late autumn, after more than a decade in the Golden Cage, Vlad stood again in Târgoviște, then Bucharest, wearing a last crown that already felt thin with cracks. The country he reclaimed was not the country he had left. Boyars who had prospered under Ottoman patronage smiled with both faces. Market towns looked north for credit and south for permission. Villages measured the wind before choosing a banner. Vlad moved fast because he understood what he had re-entered. A pressured chamber where sovereignty lasted only as long as fear or friendship could be sustained. He punished visibly to stiffen spines, promised protection to coax back those who had switched twice, and sent riders to summon grain and men for the campaign every Wallachian ruler must eventually face. The one against time. Winter sharpened into steel. Mehmed could not ignore a revived enemy on the Danube flank, and Laiota returned with Ottoman backing. Skirmishes frayed into a rolling fight south of the capital. Flooded fields, leafless orchards, ditches half frozen. The kind of ground where cavalry splinters and infantry drowns in mud. Sources fracture here. One tradition has an Ottoman detachment spring the trap near Bucharest, cutting down Vlad in the melee as he rallied his line. Another, darker, whispered even by later Wallachian chroniclers, places the knife in familiar hands. Boyars who had knelt only yesterday, striking amidst the confusion to purchase a future with the Sultan. In both tellings, the field ends the same way. A body in armor face down in brown slush, loyalists dying around it, and a circle of enemies measuring the head. What can be said with firmer voice? The head went to Constantinople, preserved in honey, spiked and displayed. It solved an imperial problem that armies had failed to resolve cleanly. Mehmed II had not conquered the man in Târgoviște. Now he possessed the image, verified, inert, exemplary. The torso's fate dissolves into rumor. Monks at Snagov ferrying a corpse by night, a grave before the altar, an empty tomb centuries later. The politics, however, are plain. By year's end, 1476, the last reign was over. Laiota was back by Ottoman grace, and Hungary's champion had turned from asset to absence. Vlad's third crown had lasted weeks. His last field, a mourning. What endured was not the possession of Wallachia, but the fact that even in death he had to be certified on a spike. Proof that terror, once minted, must be publicly cancelled before it spends again. The The tomb is a story before it is a stone. On the island monastery of Snagov, tradition points to a slab before the high altar and says, "Here the voivode lies." When antiquarians pried at the floor centuries later, they found not the armored skeleton of a decapitated prince, but scraps, animal bone, potsherds, the sediment of other lives. Perhaps Vlad was never there. Perhaps he was, and the grave was emptied in the wars that never stopped lapping these reed-choked shores. Perhaps the monks misdirected the curious on purpose, guarding a relic from politics. What we can verify is thin. A late medieval claim of burial at Snagov, a modern opening that yielded no prince. Between them stretches a silence that refuses to choose. The void invited invention, and the printers obliged. In the 1460s to 70s, Saxon towns that had bled under Vlad's reprisals ran their presses hot with pamphlets and woodcuts. Dracula, dining amid forests of impaled bodies, boiling humans in cauldrons, nailing turbans to skulls. These were not neutral records. They were commercialized grievance and border propaganda, eagerly purchased by readers who liked their horror moralized. South of the Carpathians, chronicles told a sterner, self-justifying tale, a hard ruler for a hard frontier, just to the poor, lethal to the treacherous. Later, humanist compilers braided both strands, monstrosity and stern justice, because the market for wonder and example was the same. Then came Romanticism, and with it the pleasure of shadows. The name Dracula, born from a knightly badge, the dragon, slid into Latinized demonics. Ballads thickened the air. Travelers repeated what innkeepers swore their grandfathers had seen. In the 19th century, a novelist plucked the name from a learned book and married it to another myth's thirst. The prince who weaponized fear became fear's patron saint. Modern scholars spent a century unpicking the knots, separating Wallachian diplomatic letters from German broadsides, Ottoman reports from Moldavian annals, plausible cruelty from carnival excess. Some things stand: the Easter purge of boyars, the Danubian raids, the night attack, the Valley of Stakes as theater of war, the beheading and the honeyed head. Others remain mist and echo, numbers inflated by enemies, virtues inflated by partisans, and graves that will not speak. What endures most clearly is less a man than a map. Wallachia was a hinge land, clipped between mountain and river, empire and empire, taxed by the Ottomans and courted by the Hungarians. A polity too small for its predators to ignore and too exposed to survive on softness. In such a chamber, governance becomes performance. Banners, punishments, gifts, hostages, oaths, and sometimes a forest that stares back. Vlad learned that grammar perfectly. He made terror legible at imperial scale, and for a season it bought him sovereignty. But the currency corroded its spender. Fear devoured the boyars he needed, the peasants he taxed, the allies he begged, the wife at the parapet, and at the last, the prince himself, his head certified on a spike, so the story could move on. The grave may be empty, the afterlife is crowded.